This woman allegedly shot her husband when he asked for a divorce. Christina Pasqualetto from Arizona had apparently been trying to save her marriage. It may be a little bit more difficult now. On the 20th of September, the 62-year-old woman allegedly drove to the home that she shared with her estranged husband, John. She reportedly drove around about midnight and the pair got into an argument over their marriage. John told her that he wanted a divorce, whereas she did not. At this point, John said that he was in bed and Christina allegedly pulled out a weapon and shot him. The 80-year-old was able to defend himself and knock her down so that the gun fell out of her hand. He was luckily then able to flee round to the neighbour's house and get them to call the police. Police raced round and found John with a gunshot wound to his wrist. He was taken to a local hospital for treatment. Now, John alleges that he changed the locks of the house before the incident but had noticed items from the house going missing. John accuses Christina of forging a cheque from him for $10,000. She has admitted to forgery and theft. She has been charged for this and also for attempted first-degree murder and aggravated assault.
The girl filming that video, Xiao Xiaomei from China, would eventually fall to her death while filming on TikTok. So before her death, Xiao had accrued over 100,000 followers on the Chinese version of TikTok called Douyin. On her profile, 23-year-old Xiao would constantly post videos of her standing over very high heights, as she worked as a crane operator for her profession. So for her videos, Xiao was always pushing the limit, trying to make herself do crazier, more dangerous stunts to attract viewers online. I mean, just as you can see in the first video I showed you, she was very high up. And personally, just watching that gave me anxiety. But on June 20th, 2021, at around 5 p.m., something would happen. Xiao was up top filming a video, and she was still recording when she slipped. And in that clip, she captured her harrowing fall over 160 feet to her death. Now, this is actually a still that I believe is from the end of the video, looking up at the crane that she just fell down from. And obviously, I cannot play you the full clip here on TikTok. But after her death, she was celebrated as a creator and a lovely person in China. And this is just a reminder that the Grim Reaper really can strike at any time.
Have you ever heard of the Sunderland Strangler? Stephen Greaveson is a lesser-known serial killer from Sunderland in the UK. He was active during the 1990s. Shockingly, he was known to lure young boys into abandoned buildings and kill them, and did so to 4 teenagers between 1990 and 94. In November 1993, he lured 18-year-old Thomas Kelly to an abandoned allotment shed. He killed him and then set him on fire. On the 4th of February the following year, he murdered 15-year-old David Hanson. Later that month, he would go on to lure 15-year-old David Grief to the same spot that he killed Thomas. Again, he killed him and set him on fire. All 3 boys attended Monk Wearmouth Academy. Now, Stephen was initially arrested in March and charged with attempted burglary at the house where he'd killed David Hanson. He was eventually charged in November 1995 with those 3 murders. He was given 35 years in prison. In November 2000, while in prison, he was arrested again. He was questioned over the 1990 murder of 14-year-old Simon Martin. Simon had been murdered in Gilside House in Roker. It took 12 years until he was eventually charged with this crime, and in 2013 he admitted being responsible. He was convicted of that murder in October 2013.
In 2019, Brazilian gang leader Clavino da Silva, otherwise known as Shorty, attempted to escape prison dressed as his 19-year-old daughter. So apparently on the day that he tried to escape, Shorty's 19-year-old daughter had been visiting him, and he had had this disguise smuggled in. So he literally just tried to walk out of the prison looking like this. But when the guards suspected something was up with this random woman that was trying to leave the prison, they got out their phones, started recording, and told the person that they needed to strip. And this is what led to that disturbing looking video that I played you a clip from at the beginning of this TikTok. Obviously, it was revealed that this was not a 19-year-old girl. It was a 42-year-old gang leader who was supposed to be serving a 73-year-long sentence. But this wasn't the end of the story for Shorty. You see, just a few days after this escape attempt, Shorty was found dead in his prison cell. Authorities afterwards claimed that Shorty had taken his own life. But in my opinion, I believe this might have been some sort of gang retaliation for the embarrassment that he put them through. I don't know, it is a pretty eerie disguise when you look at it. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife Courtney. It's available on all streaming platforms like Apple Podcasts.
This teenager killed his ex-girlfriend for a free cooked breakfast. Back in 2010, 15-year-old Joshua Davis was in a relationship with Becca Aylward. The pair were the same age and they both went to Bridgend High School in Wales. Rebecca, who was known to her friends as Becca, had dreams of one day becoming a barrister. Upsettingly, throughout the relationship, the schoolboy had been aggressive and controlling with Becca. He'd even sent texts to his friends bragging that one day he might kill her. On one occasion, one of Joshua's friends replied, saying that if he did so, he would buy him a cooked breakfast. Chillingly, Joshua would later say to his friend, "Don't say anything, but you may just owe me." In October 2010, despite the pair having broken up, Joshua told Rebecca he wanted to meet her at a local woods. Alarm bells rang for Rebecca's family when she failed to return home that day. No one knew that she had been lured to the woods by Joshua for him to kill her. He had beaten her to death with a rock. Her body was discovered the following day at 9 a.m. face down on the ground. The same day that Joshua had killed Rebecca, he sent texts to her phone to make it look like he was concerned about her. However, the truth did eventually emerge. Thankfully, Rebecca's parents knew that it was Joshua she was intending on meeting, so police investigated him. They confiscated his phone, and the evidence on the phone was enough to arrest him. Joshua and his friends tried to blame each other for the killing, but he was finally found guilty of the hideous crime. Shockingly, he only got 14 years in prison, and the 14 years is nearly up.
Basically, this was a real-life killer clown, bro. So Marlene Warren was the victim, right?
Okay.
So she had 2 kids. She was married before. Her husband ended up dying. Then she ended up marrying this guy named Michael Warren. Some time flies by and stuff. They kind of started getting a little distant from each other. A lot of arguments and And the thing that kind of like really separated them was the death of one of her kids. And it was a little weird because she would tell her mom, if something happens to me, I'm pretty sure it would be him. And then one day she's at home with her son, right? Out of nowhere, they hear a knock at the door and they see a white car outside. It's a white Chrysler. She answers the door. There's a clown standing outside.
Gosh, okay.
With balloons in the hands and flowers, right? The clown, all they do is hand her the balloons.
And they stand there?
Hand her the and flowers. Out of nowhere, they pull out a gun, a small revolver, and shoot her in the face, bro. They walk to the car and they run. And then the son, he described the clown as a orange hair, red and white paint on their face, and like a full clown suit. Keep in mind the dad wasn't home.
So this already sounds kind of sus.
So they're investigating where the fuck he was, because yo, they had no evidence that the dad did it, bro. He literally had people and witnesses saying that he was at this spot doing this and that. But then they find a store literally a little bit away from the house. They say that a girl with gloves came in to buy flowers and the balloons. They also went to a costume shop where recently an orange wig and a clown costume was purchased, as well as red paint and white face paint, bro. 12 years later after that, they find out that he was having an affair.
Somebody else?
Her name was Sheila Keene. They get married, bro.
Who, the
Sheila Keene
and the husband?
So now the cops are like, what the fuck is happening, bro? I thought y'all said y'all didn't know.
Ex-cop allegedly kidnapped man, shot him in the head, and then threw his body in a river while on duty. This is Patrick Ferguson behind me. This happened in Memphis. On May 8th, the grand jury found him guilty for the murder and the kidnapping of Robert Howard. They also charged Joshua Rogers, who tried to cover up for Patrick, so he got charged for being a co-conspirator. This whole thing happened back in 2021. The girlfriend of the victim reported him missing. They were able to connect Robert Howard's disappearance to Ferguson. Apparently the two men knew each other. It stated Ferguson pulled up to Howard's home, held him at gunpoint, and forced him into the squad car. Obviously, Ferguson got charged with first-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, kidnapping, conspiracy to kill. Ferguson was immediately relieved of duty. But my biggest question is, and I couldn't find it in any true crime articles I've been reading, why did he kill Robert Howard? The two men have some beef going on. Was it over money or something like that? Did Ferguson just wake up one day and realize he hated him? Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments section below. If you're from Memphis, have you heard about this story? And as always, these videos are for informational purposes only.
Yogurt shop murders still to this day remains unsolved, and only because of the complications of the judges and the lack of evidence that they had. The victims' names were Eliza Thomas, Jennifer Harbison, Sarah Harbison, and Amy Ayers. So Jennifer and Sarah, they were sisters. Eliza and Jennifer were co-workers, while Sarah and Amy, they were best friends. And the yogurt shop that they worked at was called the I Can't Believe It's Yogurt. A lot of people described it as a very, very friendly and comfortable environment, to the point where whenever it got to closing time, the customers would help the employees clean up the place. And also they were so comfortable to the point where the employees would be able to count money without locking the doors. So on December 6th, 1991, it was supposed to be just a regular, normal day. Sarah and Amy planned to have a sleepover at their house. They were also planning to go to the mall, look around, shop, and eat pizza. But before that, she told Jennifer, the older sister, to drop them off there before you enter your shift. Jennifer enters her shift like normal. Sarah and Amy pull up around 9:30ish. They're there just chilling at a booth, eating pizza. There was two men that were sitting at a booth just whispering with each other. They weren't eating no frozen yogurt. They were just
sitting there.
Only one of them had like a can of soda. That's it. And there was this one lady who noticed the two guys. So she ends up telling Jennifer and Eliza, "You guys feel comfortable? Do you guys want me to say anything to them?" And they're like, "Nah, yeah, we're okay. We're just cleaning up right now. We're about to close either way. So by the time we're closed, it should be gone."
Fuck.
So 11 o'clock comes. That doesn't happen. At 11:03, the register get a no sale ring up, meaning a robbery, because you only press that button whenever you need to get money out of the register. Next to the frozen yogurt shop, there was a party supply store. The owner of that store notices that there's smoke coming out of the shop, calls the fire department. They come, they extinguish the fire. They're looking around the building, and then one of the firefighters tells the other firefighter, "Yo, is that a fucking..."
When this teenager was found murdered, very disturbing information about years prior was revealed. It was 1995 in Somerville, Massachusetts. Deanna Kreman was a 17-year-old local girl with dreams of becoming a school teacher. She'd been babysitting local children in the area for a while and was passionate about child development. She'd been working part-time at a local shop for a few months. Her colleagues described her as a friendly and positive girl. Tragically, on the 30th of March, she was found dead. The evening prior, she'd gone to see her 18-year-old boyfriend, Thomas LeBlanc. They'd been together for about a year at this point. She was due home by her curfew, which was 10 p.m., but she never made it home. Some boys were walking to school the following morning and made a horrifying discovery. Deanna's body was lying partially nude next to a fence. She'd been strangled to death. Now, police interviewed her boyfriend, Thomas, who told them that he'd walked her halfway home and then they'd gone their separate ways. Just days later, police announced that they were looking into local man Charles Houghton, who was 36. He was a fireman in the area. They also announced that they were looking for an unknown male between the ages of 40 and 45 who was about 5'10". They believed the mystery man to have been in the area at the time of the murder. However, there were very little leads and the case soon went cold. Interestingly, shortly after the murder, Thomas's mum Susan was granted a restraining order from him. She chillingly stated, "When Tommy goes into a rage, I fear that my life is in jeopardy." It's reported that on multiple occasions he'd thrown furniture at her, and she stated that living with him was like living in a prison. Now, at first, people didn't know whether this was obviously the trauma of losing his girlfriend that was causing this. However, it was revealed that years prior to the murder, he had anger issues. It was revealed that when he was younger, he'd on multiple occasions shot his mum's cat with a BB gun. He moved away from the area after Deanna's death and stopped cooperating with police. Her family are still pleading with the public to come forward if you have any information. Her murder remains unsolved to this day.
This might be the worst pedophile in American history. This is 58-year-old Scott Allison from Kentucky. In 2021, authorities identified Scott as being one of the worst pedophiles on the internet. This account that the authorities had been tracking was posting some of the most vile, disturbing CP and CSAM that they had ever seen, depicting the abuse of children as young as 2 years old. Scott had usernames on 2 different dark web pedophile websites, where he regularly made posts talking to other pedophiles and posted some of his collection. When authorities finally got Scott's IP address and tracked him down to his house, they made an absolutely grim discovery. When authorities raided his home, they found a hard drive. And on that hard drive, authorities located over 130,000 images and videos depicting CP or CSAM. Let's just think about that for a second. 130,000 individual images and videos. Just imagine how many kids were victimized to get a collection that big. They also, after doing a forensic search of his computer, found that Scott had saved 108,000 posts and pages related to CP or CSAM on the dark web in saved searches on his computer. Scott, as it turns out, was one of the dark web's biggest pedo peddlers, and he was advertising all across the dark web that he had one of the biggest collections of CP that people could get access to pay him for. Thankfully, though, Scott did plead guilty, but unfortunately, it's not life in prison. This is not life in prison. It should be, but it isn't. Scott's sentence is probably going to be a minimum of 15 years, up to 30 years in prison, a large fine. But once again, that means with good behavior like we've seen with these creeps so many times, this guy can put his time in and then eventually rejoin society. I think that with these people, you literally just lock them up, throw away the key, that's it. But obviously our government doesn't see these crimes the same way that we do. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife Courtney. It's available to listen to for free on all streaming platforms like Apple Podcasts.
This is the terrifying murder case of Rosie Palmer from Hartlepool. It was the 30th of June 1994. 3-year-old Rosie had been at nursery that day and was outside playing when an ice cream van turned up. She got an ice cream from the van and seemed her usual happy self. The ice cream man watched as Rosie made her way back home, which was just walking distance from the van. However, 5:30 p.m. came and went and she was still not back home, and her parents started to get worried. Neighbours helped her stepdad look all around the neighbourhood for the little girl, but there was no luck. At 8:45 p.m. she was reported missing. Police scoured the local area, but there was no sign of Rosie. They went round some of the local houses and checked in the homes, but they couldn't see anything. Now, one neighbour on Frederick Street caught attention of police when his demeanour seemed to change. After initially being quite cooperative, Sean Armstrong started to act odd. So odd, in fact, that police decided to go back into his flat and have another look. This time, inside a bin bag in his cupboard, they found little Rosie. She was deceased and had been severely SA'd. Some of her clothing was found in another bag. The 32-year-old denied having any knowledge of how the little girl got there. He said that somebody else must have put her in his flat. Now, Sean was actually known in the area for being quite dodgy and inappropriate. Frustratingly, in 1993, a social worker had told police that Sean was a danger to children. He'd actually made prior threats about children, and despite this was rehoused in an area full of families with young kids. Now, Sean would eventually admit to killing the little girl, but would only admit to manslaughter, not murder, due to his mental health issues. However, while in prison, Sean got a pen pal and started writing back and forth with a woman. He eventually admitted that he was fabricating his symptoms and did in fact murder Rosie. He had no idea that the woman he was speaking to was actually a crime reporter. She informed police, obviously, of his confession. He was given a 16-year minimum sentence and has been denied parole. He can reapply in 2025.
Wisconsin teacher who continuously sexually assaulted one of her students was just released from jail into the public. Anyone living in Wisconsin who has kids should listen to this story because it's bad. So this is 24-year-old Madison Lynn Bergman. Madison began teaching at Rivercrest Elementary School in Wisconsin in the fall of 2022. But last week she was arrested after a dad found alarming texts between his son and his 5th grade teacher, Miss Bergman. The victim is an 11-year-old boy, and he obviously has not been publicly identified because he's underage. In the text between the two, Madison told him how much she enjoyed him touching her and making out with him at school. In one text to the boy, Madison said, quote, "I want to just grab your face, push you to the floor, and make out with you." End quote. In another text, she said, quote, "I almost kissed you when you were on the ground today, but I got distracted by your stomach." End quote. These texts were discovered after the boy's mom overheard him and Madison talking on the phone on April 29th. After she found out, she emailed the teacher and asked her to stop contacting the boy outside of school. And then she gave her son's phone to his dad. His dad then found the text messages, printed them off, and stormed into the school, which prompted the school to contact authorities. During the investigation, police found a folder in Madison's purse with the boy's name on it. And inside the folder were handwritten notes talking about how much they kissed. In one letter, Madison wrote, quote, "One of my cousins is in the 5th grade, and I can't imagine a man talking to her how we talk. I know we have a special relationship and I do love you more than anyone in the world, but I have to be the adult here and stop." According to reports, Madison goes into detail in the letters saying how much the boy turns her on and how she's obsessed with him. Authorities then found a letter in the boy's desk from Madison that said, quote, "I love you so much it hurts." End quote. So obviously Madison was arrested, and when questioned about everything, she told police that she had a close relationship with the boy's family, and she said that she got his cell phone number back in December when the boy's family invited her to go skiing with them over winter break. She said the reason she got his cell phone number was just as a precaution in case they got separated at the park. But according to the boy, he said he texted his teacher almost daily ever since that trip. The boy also told authorities that they had kissed several times in the classroom since March, and Madison would often sit next to him during independent reading time and touch his thigh. Madison has since been charged with 1 count of first-degree child sexual assault. But what's absolutely outrageous is that she was just released from the St. Croix County Jail back into the public on a $25,000 bond. And to make matters worse is that it was a $25,000 signature bond, meaning she was released without actually having to pay anything. Her next court date is set for May 30th, and she's since been put on unpaid administrative leave. In the meantime, she's not allowed on school property or at school events, and she can't be in contact with the students, their parents, or staff at the school, as well as anyone under 18. Madison was also just about to get married in July, but because of all of this, her fiance has called off the wedding. The fact that she's just walking free in the public right now is sickening to me. If you're in the community and have kids, just be careful.
Alright, so I've been ghost hunting for 7+ years now, and I've created this iceberg of a list of some of the locations that I've investigated, from the least scary up top to the scariest on the very bottom. Here's kind of a preview of my ranking. Now let's talk about some of these. So I'm first going to start off with the investigations that didn't scare me. I didn't really feel that much energy in the places, and one of these answers is going to shock you. Let's just nip it right in the bud, the Conjuring House. So I actually went viral for spending the night at the Conjuring House back in 2020. I know a lot of famous YouTubers and other people have investigated the Conjuring House, and it is a crazy story, but I was there all night. I slept in the house. I investigated. I was alone in the basement, and honestly, compared to the hundreds of places that I've been, I just really didn't feel that much energy. And even in the video that I produced about the Conjuring House, nothing really happened. But obviously, if you've seen the Conjuring movies, I've actually talked to members of the Perron family. Ed and Lorraine Warren basically made this place famous through their investigations, and the story of the actual haunting there that happened in the 70s is pretty crazy if you want to read about it. Second on my not scary list is the Kennesaw House, located in Marietta, Georgia. I was just at this location last year. First of all, let me say they charged me a lot of money to investigate overnight. And while the history is pretty interesting of this building, it was built in 1845 and it used to be a Civil War hospital. But I was there for hours and hours throughout the night, and really nothing happened the entire time. I was really trying to bring the spirits out, but it really was almost silent in this building. So third on my not scary category is the Birdcage Theater in Tombstone, Arizona. This is known to be one of the most haunted places in America. I know I've heard from a lot of people, and I don't doubt that things do happen there. But the history here is what's really interesting. It opened in 1881, and it actually had the world's longest poker game played in the basement of this building. It lasted for 8 years. The walls of this theater are actually riddled with bullet holes from all the shootouts that happened in there, and I'm assuming a lot of people died. But when I was there, I actually dressed up like a cowboy in my YouTube video along with my dad, who was there with me at the time. We really tried to bring something out. We reenacted somebody getting shot in a shootout, and still, it was once again just completely silent the entire night. But as you can see from pictures like these, it is a creepy building, and I'm not invalidating anyone else's experiences by making this TikTok. This is just from my personal experiences. The last on this list is the Volstead House in Granite Falls, Minnesota. It was the home of Congressman Andrew Volstead, who started the Prohibition. And once again, it's supposed to be haunted. I was there last year all night investigating. Nothing happened. We even brought out bottles of liquor and poured shots for ourselves and drank the shots in there to see if the guy who started Prohibition would come out, as he would have been opposed to what we were doing, but nothing happened. It was a very cold, very quiet night in that house. But let me tell you, as we get to the bottom of this list, I'm going to tell you some stories that you're not going to believe. Terrifying stuff that's happened to me. So follow to see the rest of these parts if you want to hear the stories.
What you're about to see is an attempted kidnapping of a child while at school by this man. This video is incredibly disturbing, so watch at your own risk. This is 33-year-old Solomon Galligan. He's a registered sex offender who recently tried to kidnap a young boy at school. At around 2:20 p.m. on April 19th, he walked onto the playground of Black Forest Hills Elementary School and approached the 5th graders who were at recess. After a few minutes, he lunged at the children and tried to grab a young boy before tripping and falling over a blanket that he was carrying. Solomon then got back up and tried going after the boy again, but the other kids ran away and started yelling "stranger danger," which is what caught the teacher's attention and made Solomon leave the school property. Obviously, because of this, authorities were notified, and the boy who Solomon targeted told police his description and that he had white powder on his face and smelled like alcohol. The Cherry Creek School District then emailed the parents explaining what happened and said that if they wanted to pick up their kids as a result, that it was okay to do so. And after seeing this email, one of the parents saw a man fitting Solomon's description at a nearby Walgreens and contacted authorities. It was there that police found Solomon, who asked to be taken to the hospital after claiming to have been assaulted. After taking him to an urgent care, an officer ran a background check on him and found that he was a registered sex offender. Solomon was then arrested and has since been charged with kidnapping and child abuse. He is currently being held in the Arapahoe County Jail on a $25,000 bond. What's incredibly alarming is that Solomon has a lengthy criminal history which includes charges of assault, burglary, and sex crimes. In 2011, he was convicted on a charge of non-consent sexual contact, and according to his family, he's been in and out of jail for the past 12 years, but he always gets a slap on the wrist and is let out. Solomon's family says that his troubles really began when he was 16 years old and diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. They said that he ran away a lot and always seemed to get into trouble, but he ran away for good when he was 18 years old. He reportedly ends up in jail every 6 months or so, and his family says that that's the only time that they ever know where he's at. They also said that they're happy when he's in jail because he's not out causing harm to innocent people. His family thinks that the system is failing him and his victims because of the horrible cycle of being arrested, then being deemed incompetent to stand trial because of his mental health. He's then sent off to be institutionalized, but every single time there's always a shortage of beds in the mental health facilities, so he's always released back into society. As for the school, the Cherry Creek School District is reportedly launching an investigation into how Solomon went unnoticed for so long on school property. The school released a statement saying that improvements are being made and that they have changed the supervision area so that teachers on recess always have full visibility of the students. They've gone on to say that all staff have been retrained in safety protocols, but it took 10 full days to have the meeting and for these new protocols to be put in place. Because of this, parents of the kids at the school want the principal to be fired and have certain employees be put on administrative leave, but the school won't take any action until the investigation is complete. This story is so scary, and I can't even imagine what it was like to see this man running up to you, especially as a child.
Alabama woman charged with murder for allegedly kidnapping and pushing a missing woman off of a cliff. Loretta Carr, right here, is responsible for Mary Isbell's death right here. Her charges are capital murder and kidnapping, of course. The state of Alabama will push to pursue the death penalty on Loretta Carr. In association with her, her daughter Jessie Kelly was also involved in this, so they will be charging her as well. Her husband reported her missing on December 27th of 2021. On June 20th of 2023, the sheriff department around the area found some credible evidence in her case. All of the evidence led back to Loretta Carr. They found her body by Little River Canyon National Park. This is about a week after they found the evidence leading back to Carr. Now, they found her on her birthday. She would have been 39 at that time. All evidence points to them leading her off a cliff and then pushing her. Apparently, all these people, the mom, the daughter, and then the victim here met through a boyfriend. It's unclear whose boyfriend it was, but kidnapping someone and then pushing them off a cliff? That is insane. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and as always, these videos are for informational purposes only.
This man killed his best friend for taking videos of his daughter. This case takes place in Russia in September 2021. Vyacheslav Machosov was a 34-year-old man who was known by his nickname Slava. He is a husband and father and a very hard-working man who worked in a factory to provide for his family. While working at the factory, Slava made friends with a 32-year-old man named Oleg who is on the left. The two became close and would often go out and get drinks together. Slava trusted Oleg a lot and considered him to be his best friend. When Slava and his wife needed someone to watch their children, Oleg would be there to help whenever. However, the trust Oleg grew with Slava was for a very unsettling reason. He built up the trust so he can get access to Slava's daughter, who was just 6 at the time. For a couple of years, if Slava and his wife needed someone to watch their kids, they would enlist Oleg every time, who was always happy to help his best friend. In September of 2021, Slava and Oleg were out drinking together, and at some point throughout the night, Oleg fell asleep. Slava then took Oleg's phone to see what he was looking at, and Slava found a very unsettling and disturbing video on his phone. He played the video and saw Oleg forcing himself on a female. Slava then made an awful discovery and realized the female victim in the video was his eldest daughter. And despite being overwhelmed by rage, Slava gave Oleg the opportunity to do one of two things. Either Oleg turned himself into the police along with all the evidence and admit to this awful crime, or Slava would take matters into his own hands. He told his former best friend that if he didn't choose the first option, he would kill him. But Oleg had other plans. Instead of turning himself in, he vanished. He ran from the village and went into hiding. Slava then went to the authorities and told them everything Oleg had done. After showing the police what he found on the phone, the police began a manhunt. The news of the crime spread like wildfire in the village, and people were extremely disgusted at what Oleg had done. And even worse, on a number of occasions, he would look after other people's children too. And many became worried that there could be more victims, and sadly, they were right. There was many more videos found on Oleg's phone which proved this wasn't his first victim. For 5 years, he would torment the young in the village and threaten them to stay quiet or else. Oleg would form relationships and friendships with people for this disgusting reason. And as I said, the police were supposed to start looking for Oleg, but after days, it came out they haven't even began searching for him yet. So Slava instead began to track him down. And after a week or so, Slava found him. What happens next is up to speculation, as some believe Slava wasn't telling the truth. Slava was able to track down Oleg and forced him into a secluded forest. It's here where Slava claims he forced Oleg to dig his own grave at knife point, and after digging the grave, Slava gave Oleg the same option again, either turn himself into the police or take his own life. After this second ultimatum, Oleg tried to rush at Slava, and according to Slava, Oleg accidentally stabbed himself in the stomach, resulting in him dying. Essentially, he ran into the knife a number of times. After this, Slava placed Oleg in the shallow grave and covered his body with dirt. He then left the forest and made his way back to the village. After some time passed, Slava turned himself in at the police station. He told them that Oleg stumbled into the knife during the scuffle outside the village in a forest. A week after Slava had seen the video, Oleg was dead. And this story about his death became big news and even spread to other countries. Many people looked at Slava as a hero, but legally he had killed someone who wasn't proven guilty yet. So Slava was arrested by the police. This had backlash as many people didn't see Slava as a danger to the public and believed he should be released at once. Everyone was on his side. Even a former Russian presidential candidate came forward and sided with Slava. After authorities analyzed Oleg's stab wounds, it was found the injury wasn't sustained in the forest like Slava claimed, but instead at a different location. Everyone then came together to fund Slava's legal battle, saying any father would have done the same thing. And in a landmark decision, the charges against Slava would change from murder to inciting someone to take their own life. And this charge carries a way lesser sentence than murder. In 2022, Slava was found guilty and was sentenced to 18 months in a strict Russian penal colony. Even to this day, Slava remained true to the story he told police and denies killing his best friend. Slava only served 6 months of his sentence after being freed a year early. So what are your thoughts on this case? Do you think Slava was in the right doing what he did? Let me know your thoughts on this. I'm very curious to see your guys' opinions.
Sometimes true for stranger than fiction. The case of Richard Trenton Chase is a story which even the most depraved horror writer would struggle to create. Over the course of 4 weeks spanning across 1977 and 1978, Richard Chase took the lives of 6 innocent victims in Sacramento, California. His murders gradually progressed in violence, beginning with drive-by shootings and culminating in acts of cannibalism.
This guy is one of the most awful serial killers there has ever been, and I feel like he's never talked about. In my opinion, this guy's worse than Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer. Hi Meg, I talk about true crime. Let's get into the story of The Butcher, the worst serial killer Canada has ever seen. Robert Pickton was born October 24th, 1949, in British Columbia, Canada. Robert had quite a bad upbringing. His dad was very abusive. He actually grew up on a pig farm. From a really young age, him and his brother had to work countless hours on this pig farm. And then they were forced to go straight to school without taking a shower or anything. Because he was showing up to school unwashed, Robert started getting bullied, and they gave him the nickname Stinky Piggy. As Robert grew older, he was said to be very quiet, but he apparently sometimes had these weird bursts of bizarre behavior. These bursts would come out of nowhere and he would just start acting really strange. In 1996, Robert's brother opened up a kind of charity thing. The charity was started to try to make more money for their pig farm. It was called the Piggy Palace Good Times Society. And what they would do is they would hold huge parties and raves to try and raise money. And I'm not joking when I say huge parties and raves. 17,000 people were said to have shown up at one point. 17,000 people at once. Sex workers and biker gangs would join these parties as well. But for Robert, it all started going downhill in 1997 when he attempted to murder a girl. I don't usually do this in these videos, but a lot of you ask what blush I use, and this is the blush I use. It's usually £10 on the TikTok shop, but it's on for $5 right now. So if you click right here, you can get it. I just ordered kind of a peachy version of this. I'm not being paid to talk about this. I just saw they were on offer and you guys ask about these all the time. So get your hands on them for cheap while you can. So Robert attempts to murder a woman for the first time that we know of. According to her statement, he attempted to handcuff her and then he started stabbing her multiple times before she managed to get away. This should have been the thing that got him on police radar, but he was able to get the charges dropped because the woman he attacked was on a lot of drugs at the time, and Robert used that to come up with a story. He told police, like, she was hitchhiking, I was just trying to help her, and she attacked me. And they believed him because she was on drugs. And unfortunately, for the next 60 women he would kill, he was let go. And he was able to come up with a strategy that wouldn't get him caught next time. He developed a plan and started killing a bunch of women. And Robert was really, really good at staying under the radar. Now, what did he do exactly? Let me tell you. Because it's disturbing. First of all, he always went for hitchhikers, addicts, or prostitutes. And what he would do is he would promise them money, drugs, accommodation, anything to get them back to his farm. Once he got them back, he would then shoot or strangle them to death. And this next part is why he was given the name the Butcher. He would take the victims' bodies, chop them up, and feed them to his pigs. Now, if you're not aware of this already, pigs will literally eat anything, everything. So the evidence was just, bye. They were getting rid of the evidence for him. All of a sudden, there is an increase in missing women in the area. But sadly, because he only went after sex workers or addicts or hitchhikers, no one cared. And this always makes me so mad with cases like these. Like, they're still human beings, but no bodies were showing up, so there was no crime, no body, no crime. But as the numbers started rising, people were kind of getting a bit worried. A group of people that weren't the police actually got a list together of all of the names of these young women who were missing. They brought that to the police and were like, do you see now? And that's when the investigation actually began into finding out what happened to these girls. And all of these girls had one person in common: Robert Pickton. He was the only person whose name continuously came up when they were looking for these girls. Police needed a way to get onto the farm with a warrant without him knowing about it and hiding all the evidence first. And so they heard that he had possession of an illegal firearm. And so they used that as the cover-up to get onto his property. On the property, they found multiple items that belonged to these missing women, along with some blood-stained clothing and tiny bone fragments. Now, things aren't looking too good for Robert, but because the pigs had eaten all the evidence, basically all of it, they were only able to charge him with the murder of 6 women. And so he got 6 counts of murder. When he got arrested, he actually said that he killed 49 women and that he was sad that he didn't get to round up to 50. What the hell, Robert? What does he want the police officer to say, like, oh, I feel so bad for you? No! He was arrested in 2002, and this trial was huge. Of course, he was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. But guys, that's not the worst part of this story. because I'm getting to that now. One element of the story that I kept out until now is that Robert sold the meat of his pigs to people who lived around the area. These pigs, who ate the remains of 60 women, were sold to his neighbors. When I say neighbors, I just mean people who live in the area. So like secondhand cannibalism. I could never eat pig again if that was me. So yeah, they were pretty disturbed and freaked out by this information, which is totally understandable and just totally disgusting. After a huge search of his property, police now believe that the number of women Robert killed was in the 60s. 60 women. 60 mother, daughters, wives. It's insane. It really annoys me with cases like these. I know it was like in 2002 and things have changed, but have they? I find that a lot of cases like these that I cover always start with, oh, all these women were going missing, but they were sex workers, but they were drug addicts, who cares? And it's like, it's insane to me that like they're not seen as equals to any other woman walking on the street, but whatever. Hopefully that changes. And for those wondering, I have actually covered this story before, but the quality of the video was so bad that I couldn't keep it up anymore. Like, it really bothered me to watch back, so I thought I would remake it in a higher quality way. I hope you guys enjoyed it regardless, and have a wonderful day. My heart goes out to every single one of the victims, their families, and people who cared about them, and I hope Robert rots in jail. Anyways, this is not a good representation of Canadians. We're actually really nice people. I'll see you all in the next video. Love you guys. Bye.
This man cut his kid's heart out and his wife's lung, and this case is absolutely disturbing. This case takes place on March 27th, 2004 in Texas. Andre Thomas was a 21-year-old man who lived in Texas. His family had problems with drinking and mental illness. His grandmother even claimed she would see visions from God in her dreams, and his mother also said she heard voices coming from the divine. Nevertheless, Andre was described as a very nice man and extremely intelligent. But when Andre reached the age 10, things started to change. Andre began telling his friends at school he can hear voices in his head just like his mother and grandmother. Andre would also try to take his own life at the age of 10 and another time at the age of 13. And after these attempts, his mother would say to him, "I wish I just aborted you instead." And when Andre was 16, he got his girlfriend Laura Boren pregnant. Andre was very close with the Boren family and considered them his family too. But they had no idea he was hearing voices inside of his head for a number of years. Laura and Andre's child was born on August 30th, 1999, and he was named Andre Jr. And in 2001, Andre and Laura got married and moved into their own place together. But not long after, they broke up and Laura moved back in with her parents. And this caused Andre's mental health to spiral. He turned to alcohol and drugs and was in and out of jail for petty crimes. Andre moved in with his brother Brian, and they would fight about the smallest things, and on one occasion, Andre stabbed Brian in the back and he was then sent to jail for 3 months. And despite his obvious mental health problems, the authorities failed to provide him with any help at all, and instead released him completely unmedicated. Andre was still fixated on Laura, and following his issues with his mental health, Laura thought it was best to keep his visits with his child to a minimum. And in 2003, Laura met another man named Brian Hughes, and they began dating and had a child named Leia together. Andre got a job and was then fired shortly after, and following this, he told his friends he wanted to end his own life and that he couldn't stand the sound of his own voice, so he began to tape his mouth shut. Andre's friends then took him to a mental health facility and they gave him an emergency order to go to a nearby hospital immediately. This means if Andre didn't check into the hospital, the police would be notified and he would be arrested. Andre then left the mental health facility and went right home, and the cops didn't do a thing. And Andre's mental health continued to decline and he refused to let go of Laura. And this brings us to March 27th. On March 27th, 2004, Andre got dressed and put on overalls with many pockets, and then placed 3 knives in those pockets. He then left his apartment and made his way over to where Laura and Brian lived with their 2 children. As Andre walked towards the house, he saw Brian leaving for work. Andre waved and Brian waved back. Once outside the door of the apartment, Andre broke inside, and upon hearing this, Laura came running down to see what was happening. She then ran towards Andre, but as she did, Andre pulled out one of the knives and stabbed her in the heart. Laura fell to the ground and began to gush blood and sadly passed away from the attack. Once she was dead, Andre then carved out a piece of her lung which he believed to be her heart and then placed it inside the pocket with his knife. He then pulled out a second knife and walked towards the children's bedroom. He entered the room and pinned down his own son, who was awake from the commotion, and then stabbed him in the chest. He then carved out his son's heart and placed it in his pocket with the second knife. He was very careful not to cross-contaminate the blood. He then turned to Laura and Brian's daughter and pulled the girl from her bed and then stabbed her and removed her heart, and then placed the knife and heart in another separate pocket. Laura was 20 years old, Andre's son Andre Jr. was 4, and Brian and Laura's daughter Leah was just 13 months old. Andre then stabbed himself twice in the chest and laid down next to Laura's body, expecting to die, but he didn't. So he then fled the scene with the 2 children's heart and a piece of Laura's lung in his pockets. Andre then pulled out his phone and called Laura's parents, leaving a voicemail that said, "Something bad is happening to me and it keeps on happening. I don't know what is going on, but I need help. I think I'm in hell." Andre was arrested, and 5 days after the murder, while he was in jail awaiting trial, he removed his right eye with his bare hands. And a source says after he pulled out his eye, he quoted Mark 9:47 that says, "And if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out." Thomas was then convicted of capital murder and was given the death sentence. On December 9th, 2008, Andre removed his left eye and ate it, and said he ate his eye to prevent the United States government from reading his thoughts. On November 11th, 2022, Thomas was scheduled for execution for April 5th, 2023, but on March 7th, 2023, the State District Judge Jim Fallon delayed the execution date, giving Thomas's lawyers until July 5th to prepare a request for a competency hearing.
The story of this American female serial killer will make your hair stand up. As if her crimes are not horrific enough, she earned the nickname the Giggling Granny. How creepy is that? Nanny Doss was raised on a farm by a very controlling father, and one of the few joys that she had in life was sneaking into her mother's room and reading her romance novels, and she would daydream about the day that she'd be swept off her feet and have her happily ever after. And she got married to her first husband at the age of 16, and it was a miserable marriage. The couple had 4 daughters together, 2 of which mysteriously died of food poisoning, at which point the husband took one remaining daughter and fled because he was scared to death of Nanny. The remaining infant baby named Florine was left with Nanny, and Nanny picked up and married somebody new. Now this man was an alcoholic, but despite that, they were married 16 years and raised Florine together. This is where the bloodbath really begins. Nanny was in the room right after her daughter Melvina had given birth to her second grandchild, and while Melvina was still loopy from the labor drugs and she was exhausted, she could have sworn that she saw Nanny stick a hat pin in the baby's head. Melvina kind of passed out and went back to sleep, but when she came to, she started asking her family members, did Nanny have a hat pin and stick the baby in the head? And the family regretted to inform Melvina that the baby had in fact died, and yes, they did see Nanny holding a hat pin. However, the doctors couldn't give a positive explanation for the baby's death. The death of the baby absolutely shattered Melvina and her husband, and they started fighting and drifting apart, and Melvina started dating a soldier named Robert, who Nanny did not approve of. And one night when Melvina was out of the house and Robert was left alone with Nanny, Robert mysteriously died, and Nanny received $500 in life insurance that she had taken out on Robert a couple weeks earlier. Not long after that, Nanny's husband forced himself on her, and she didn't like that, so she put rat poison in his corn whiskey jar, and he died that night. Nanny married her third husband only 3 days after meeting him, and he died shortly after this of heart failure. She picked up some life insurance, bought some land, and built a new house. Her late third husband left behind a mother and a bedridden sister who also died shortly after. At this point, Nanny burned the house down, took that life insurance money, and moved on. Then Nanny landed a fourth husband, and at this point her mom moved in with him. She found out that her husband was cheating, so she poisoned him to death, and for good measure, she poisoned her mom to death too. Then she married her a fifth man named Samuel Doss, who was very disapproving of the romance novels that she loved to read. He went to the hospital one night with flu-like symptoms and was diagnosed with a severe digestive tract infection. He was treated and sent home. And a few days later, he showed up dead. The doctors were very suspicious of this, so they did an autopsy and found enough arsenic in his system to kill 20 men. Nanny was arrested shortly after this and confessed to killing 4 of her husbands, her mother-in-law, her mother, her sister-in-law, and yes, sadly, even the baby with the hat pin.
This schoolboy stabbed his teacher to death in front of a classroom full of students. 61-year-old Anne Maguire was a Spanish teacher teaching in Leeds. She'd actually worked at the school for 40 years and she was only 5 months off retirement. However, in April 2014, something absolutely horrific happened. One of her students was 15-year-old Will Cornick. He'd always been described as a smart student who never really caused any trouble. Classmates regarded him as a polite student, but after he got diagnosed with diabetes, his personality seemed to change. In 2013, he tried to join the army, but because of his diagnosis, he was rejected. Being in the army had been his dream, so this was really upsetting for him. After failing to complete his Spanish homework, he was given detention by Anne. He also expressed a wish to her that he wanted to drop Spanish, but she wouldn't let him, which only angered him more. He began to develop a deep-rooted grudge against Anne. Shockingly, he reportedly messaged his friends on Facebook asking if one of them would kill her for him for £10. During one school day, halfway through his Spanish class, Will decided to get up and attack Anne with a knife. The classmates watched on in horror as he chased her out of the classroom. When there, another teacher heard her screams and tried to shield Anne from any more blows from him. Will then allegedly returned to his class and told his classmates how it was a shame that he hadn't killed her. However, Anne did actually pass away from her injuries. Will later admitted that he did plan also to kill 2 other teachers. One of them was actually pregnant at the time. He's been sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 20 years.
John Wayne Gacy, the killer clown, did not act alone. This TikTok series is about to blow your mind, but there's a lot of information here, so proceed with caution. The case of John Wayne Gacy, the serial killer clown, is one of the most infamous true crime stories in American history. A brief overview of the case: in the 1970s, John Wayne Gacy murdered 33 young men. He buried them in the crawl space beneath his home and his yard, and he was connected to a number of different crimes. Gacy himself gained infamy because he dressed up as Pogo the Clown on the weekends and volunteered at hospitals and children's birthday parties. Now, the official story says that John Wayne Gacy acted completely alone. He had no help in carrying out any of these murders, but I really don't believe that that's the case. Through all of our research that we did for our podcast, we've determined that Gacy was connected to a number of other killers, pedophiles across America. And he even may have been connected to one of America's other most infamous serial killers, the Candyman out of Houston, Texas. So before we get into this, I want to state that I do believe that Gacy did murder some people, and I think he was very complicit in all of this, obviously, but I don't think that he acted alone. But why do I think that? So to start off, we need to talk about Jeffrey Rignall, this guy who was actually a survivor of John Wayne Gacy. After a night of abuse and essay at the hands of John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Rignall was allowed to go free. But what Jeffrey would go on to tell authorities and the media about what happened that night at Gacy's home is a major thing in this whole conspiracy. Now, Jeffrey would tell the police that while Gacy was essaying him, there was another man in the room. Now, whether or not this other man participated in the essaying or they were there to watch, it doesn't matter. Someone was watching this criminal act occur. He knew he could give a description of the guy, and he knew that someone else was there watching this happen. Then we get to Robert Bob Gilroy, who was a victim of John Wayne Gacy. So Robert Gilroy was abducted on September 15th, 1977. That's the official date that he went missing. He was supposed to show up for an event after that day, but he never showed. But John Wayne Gacy's plane tickets and records placed him as being out of the state at the time. His plane tickets from the time show that Gacy left Illinois on September 12th, and he didn't return until September 16th, the day after Robert Gilroy went missing. Already, these 2 facts point to a larger conspiracy at hand. There may have been people helping procure victims for Gacy, and he may have been even paying for these victims. And that's when we get to Philip Paskey and John David Norman, 2 of the most horrific people I've ever read about, and this is where the connections with the case start to get really shocking. And we've talked about John David Norman here on my TikTok before. This guy was connected with the higher-ups in the government. This guy had lots of political power, and he was a known pedophile. Remember, in earlier TikToks, I even told you about how John David Norman was arrested multiple times. He had Rolodexes full of index cards of the people who he was supplying these young men to. And both times, the police departments lost the Rolodexes and lost all the names of the abusers. But how did they connect to Gacy? Well, in part 2, we're going to talk about it.
This 23-year-old TikToker has just been found guilty of murder. This story is just insane. So, hi, I'm Meg. I talk about true crime. Let's get into it. At the time of the crime, Mahek Buhari was 23 years old. She had nearly 130,000 TikTok followers, 45,000 on Instagram, and thousands on YouTube as well. She made videos on makeup, lifestyle, fashion, stuff like that, and she was beginning to make a name for herself on multiple platforms. Her mother featured in a few of her videos, and they seem to be really close. Her mother's name was Ansreen, and she is 46 years old. This whole situation began around 3 years ago when her mother started a secret affair with a younger man. The man's name was Saqib, and he was only 19, I believe, when this affair started, and she was like in her 40s. He quickly fell in love with Ansreen. Sorry if I'm saying any of these names wrong, they're kind of difficult for me to pronounce. But she was married, and to her this was just like a fun little affair on the side. She had been married to her husband for over 20 years, and he did not know about this affair. The only person who knew about the affair was Mahek, the TikToker. Saqib really wanted a real relationship, and he wanted to woo her, so he spent thousands on her. It said somewhere that he spent around £2,000 trying to impress her. Fast forward to 2022, Ansreen wanted to end this relationship. He was getting pretty obsessed with her, so she just wanted nothing to do with it anymore. After she tried ending things, things got pretty intense really quick. Saqib started threatening her because he had certain videos and pictures of them together, if you know what I mean. He was blackmailing her, being like, if you leave me, I will send these to your son and your husband. And obviously she did not want these intimate moments being shown to her son. And she did not want her husband finding out either, because that would be bad. Like I said before, Mahek was the only person who knew about this affair, so her mother turned to her for help. She turned to her 23-year-old daughter. The two spoke about it over WhatsApp, which is just mistake number one. If you're gonna try to take someone out, call about it, don't text it. There's a text from Mahek to her mother saying, I'll soon get him jumped by guys and he won't know what day it is. So it doesn't necessarily mention murder, but it does, prove that she wanted to do something. Mahek, alongside her mother, decided to arrange a meeting with Saqib to give him back the $2,000 he spent on Ansreen. 11th of February 2022, the police get a frantic phone call from Saqib. Here's a transcript of the call if you want to fully read it. You can pause now. TikTok just deleted the other half of this video and I've just finished the makeup, so I'm just going to continue the story. In this phone call, Saqib is frantically trying to get the police to help him because he's being followed very closely. And he claimed in the phone call that the people following him were wearing balaclavas, which are masks kind of, and he says, they're trying to ram me off the road, they're trying to kill me, I'm going to die. He was not alone in the car, he was with his friend, his childhood friend called Mohammed. As the police were trying to get him some help, the phone call ended after he screamed and there was a huge crashing noise. Saqib's car was rammed off the road by another car off of the A64 dual carriageway. The car immediately was engulfed in flames and both the young men lost their lives. All because a woman didn't want her husband to know that she was cheating on him. Well, he knows now because the police obviously found out about it. The bodies were so badly burnt that they had to be identified using dental records. It was pretty clear that this wasn't an accident because of the 999 call he made earlier Just so you guys know, this is in England. I feel like I've not mentioned that yet. I'm not really sure how the police actually found out who was involved. Like, that whole part was not anywhere that I could personally find. But they ended up at Mehek's house, and she claimed that she was home all evening. She later then changed her story, saying that she had been there, but she wasn't involved at all. In fact, in this video footage you're seeing right now, her car was the one with the red arrow. And her mother, and Serene, was also there with her. The police confiscated Mehek's phone and asked for the password, and she gave them the wrong password, which is like sketchy as hell. When they asked her why she gave them the wrong code, she was like, oh, I was stressed out and gave you the wrong code, but it's really because she probably didn't want them reading the text messages, saying she was going to get Saqib jumped. Mehek actually said in court that she had lied to the police multiple times, but her, alongside everybody else involved, were claiming that they were innocent, that they had nothing really to do with it. It was all an accident. But after the trial, they were all found to be guilty. Every single one of the drivers involved. I think that there was one that was let go, but I don't actually really know the situation behind that because the information is not very good at the moment, because it's all very new, so it's kind of hard to find what I need. I don't think that the sentencing has been done yet because I can't actually find a number of years that her and her mother and everyone involved will be in prison for, but they're definitely going to prison. I think I read somewhere that the sentencing will be done in September, but I'm not 100% sure on that information. Like I said, it's very scarce. And that's the entire case from what I could find. It's insane to me that those two young men lost their lives because of this. Like, it's so ridiculous. It's creepy because her TikTok account is still, like, up. And it's weird to look at, like, her videos. She probably had no idea that her last video was going to be her last video. I would love to hear what you guys have to say about this case, / what case you want me to do next. I'm so mad that TikTok deleted that half of the video because the actual process was really cool into doing this makeup. But I hope that you guys still enjoyed the video regardless. I'm a little angry about it. When you're watching this video, I will be on a plane. I'm going to Canada for 3 weeks to visit some family. I have pre-recorded some videos, so you will still have your true crime, don't worry. If I have a free day, I will definitely film another true crime video while I'm in Canada, but that really depends on like what I'm doing every day. It would be kind of cool to do it in like a different setup. I don't know. I'm literally filming the pre-recorded videos after this one, so I'm literally gonna have to take off my makeup, film the other video, take off my makeup, film the other video, and my skin is not gonna be happy. That's everything for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!